That's what I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. And he said, monks, there are these 4 kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that have already come to be and for the assistance of those about to come to be. But for the nutriment edible food, gross or subtle, 2nd, contact, 3rd, mental volition, 4th, consciousness. These are the 4 kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that have already come to be and for the assistance of those about to come to be. Let's stop here for a moment. So, these are 4 things that act like food to maintain our bodies, to maintain our physical body and our mental body. So, what are these 4 things? The first one is edible food, and edible food we know is necessary for our body to survive. We need food, physical food. Then the second is contact. Now I read to you the footnotes from the commentary. It says the nutriments are conditions. For conditions are called nutriments, ahara, because they nourish or bring forth their own effects. Although there are other conditions for beings, these 4 alone are called nutriments because they serve as special conditions for the personal life continuity. For edible food is a special condition for the physical body of those beings who subsist on edible food. In the mental body, contact is a special condition for feeling, mental volition for consciousness, and consciousness for name and form. This one may be a bit hard to understand, so I try to explain. Physical food, edible food, we understand. The second is contact. Contact, once you have contact, then feeling arises, followed by perception, and then thinking, and then volition, deciding what to do. So, contact is the thing that triggers off the mental workings of the mind. So, that's why contact is nutriment for our mental body. Now, the third one is mental volition. Mental volition is, here the commentary says, is food for consciousness. But I think another interpretation we can use this mental volition. The Pali word is mano sancetana. Is I believe it has something to do with the will to live, because the will to live is very important for us to survive, for us to continue to survive. If there's no will to live, then a being will die quite fast. So, mental volition. Then the fourth is consciousness. Consciousness is more for those beings that are about to come to be. For example, if the male and the female mate, then the egg is fertilized. Now, the egg is fertilized, it does not have consciousness yet. So, this being that is due to be born in the womb, he will enter this fertilized egg. Then that consciousness descends into that fertilized egg. That is the condition, the nutriment for that being to come into life. Now I come back to this contact and mental volition. This contact, without contact, you can see how contact is a food, is a necessary condition. For example, if a person is in prison, if you put somebody in prison and you cut him off from contact from other people, and you cut him off from contact even with the sunlight, put him in a dark room, with nobody to speak to, no contact altogether, very soon this person will die. So that's why contact is you can see how contact is a nutriment or for the maintenance of a being. Because once you have contact, then you have interest in the world, feeling arises. There are things in the world that you perceive through your six senses. All this is contact. The world is perceived through contact at the six sense doors. So because we have interest in the world, then we want to survive. The will to live is generated. On the other hand, you consider another prisoner under the same circumstances. He's put in isolation in a room. He's cut off from contact from everybody else, and even the sunlight, and no sound, nothing. And although he should die very soon, there are some people who will survive. Why? Because that person may be thinking of his family, think of his children, his wife. So when he thinks, this of course comes from his memory, doesn't come from contact, comes from his memory. So when this memory of the family is generated, the will to live is very strong. So because of the will to live, even though he should die, he will hold on to life. So this, I believe, is the third nutriment mentioned here. Mental volition is the will to live. And then consciousness must come into the womb for that being to come to life. So you can see here why these four are called nutriments. And the Buddha continued, monks, these four kinds of nutriment have what as their source, what as their origin, from what are they born and produced. These four kinds of nutriment have craving as their source, craving as their origin. They are born and produced from craving. Let's stop here for a moment. What craving is this? This craving is craving for existence and craving for sensual pleasures. Because of this craving, so we want to continue with life. And the Buddha continues. And this craving has what as its source, what as its origin, from what is it born and produced. This craving has feeling as its source, feeling as its origin. It is born and produced from feeling. Stop here for a moment. More specifically, this is feeling. We have pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, and neutral feeling. It is the pleasant feeling we experience that gives rise to craving. To continue. And this feeling has what as its source? Feeling has contact as its source. And this contact has what as its source? Contact has the six sense bases as its source. And these six sense bases have what as their source? The six sense bases have mentality, materiality, phenomena as their source. And this mentality, materiality has what as its source? There's consciousness as its source. And consciousness has volition as its source. And volition has ignorance as its source. Thus monks, with ignorance as condition, volition comes to be. With volition as condition, consciousness, etc., etc. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. But with the remainderless fading away and cessation of ignorance comes cessation of volition. With the cessation of volition, cessation of consciousness, etc., etc. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. So here, this sutta is about the four nutriments, how they feed our physical body and our mental body. The next sutta is 12.12. At Savatthi, the Buddha said, monks, there are these four kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that have already come to be, and for the assistance of those about to come to be. What for? The nutriment edible food, gross or subtle. Second, contact. Third, mental volition. Fourth, consciousness. These are the four kinds of nutriment for the maintenance of beings that have already come to be, and for the assistance of those about to come to be. When this was said, The Venerable Molia Paguna said to the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, who consumes the nutriment consciousness? Because he thought consciousness is a nutriment, who consumes it? Then the Buddha said, not a valid question. I do not say one consumes. If I should say one consumes, in that case, this would be a valid question. Venerable Sir, who consumes? But I do not speak thus. Since I do not speak thus, if one should ask me, Venerable Sir, for what is the nutriment consciousness a condition? This would be a valid question. To this, the valid answer is, the nutriment consciousness is a condition for the production of future renewed existence. When that which has come into being exists, the six sense bases come to be. With the six sense bases as condition, contact. I'll stop here for a moment. So here, you see, consciousness is a condition for the production of future renewed being or existence. So just like I mentioned just now, the egg in the womb is fertilized, then new consciousness must come in into that fertilized egg, and then it produces renewed existence. That being lodges itself in that fertilized egg. And then once that consciousness has come into that egg, then slowly the six sense bases are produced. Now, if we think about it, this is not the only case of consciousness producing renewed existence, because consciousness in the Buddha's teaching is not a constant flow. It's not a constant flow. Consciousness in the Buddha's teaching is momentary. Consciousness arises and passes away. Arises and passes away. Arises and passes away. Right? So, whenever consciousness arises, that being comes into existence, right? And that being is alive when consciousness arises. And then when consciousness ceases, momentarily that being dies. And then when consciousness arises again, that being has come into life, and then it dies. But because this consciousness arises and passes away so fast that it would seem as though this is a continued consciousness, a stream of continued consciousness. But it is not so. Now, if we think carefully about it, every time this consciousness arises and passes away, why does it arise again? Why does it arise again? I think it is the will to live. Because of the will to live, the moment consciousness dies out, it has come into life again because of the will to live. That's why you see the chain of dependent origination, avijja, paccaya, sankhara, ignorance conditions volition, and volition conditions consciousness, right? So this volition is the will to live. The will to live conditions consciousness to spring into life. And then it dies out in a short moment, and then because of the will to live, it arises again. So dependent origination can be considered like the traditional interpretation, 3 lives or 2 lives, but it can be considered right here and now, in this very life, moment to moment. You can consider in that way. And then this Venerable Molia Paguna asks, Venerable Sir, who makes contact? And the Buddha said, not a valid question. I do not say one makes contact. If I should say one makes contact, in that case, this would be a valid question. Venerable Sir, who makes contact? But I do not speak thus. Since I do not speak thus, if one should ask me, Venerable Sir, with what as condition does contact come to be? This would be a valid question. To this, the valid answer is, with the 6 sense bases as condition, contact comes to be. With contact as condition, feeling. And stop here for a moment. So here you see, contact means contact at the 6 sense doors. So in order that you can that contact can arise. Of course, you must have the six sense doors. That means you must have the six sense bases. And once there is contact at the six sense bases, then feeling arises. Venerable Sir, who feels? Not a valid question, the Blessed One replied. I do not say one feels. If I should say one feels, in that case, this would be a valid question. Venerable Sir, who feels? But I do not speak thus. Since I do not speak thus, if one should ask me, Venerable Sir, with what as condition does feeling come to be? This would be a valid question. To this, the valid answer is, with contact as condition, feeling comes to be. With feeling as condition, craving. So we stop here for a moment. So, as we mentioned before, if you have pleasurable feeling, then craving arises. Venerable Sir, who craves? Not a valid question, the Blessed One replied. I do not say one craves. If I should say one craves, in that case, this would be a valid question. Venerable Sir, who craves? But I do not speak thus. Since I do not speak thus, if one should ask me, Venerable Sir, with what as condition does craving come to be? This would be a valid question. To this, the valid answer is, with feeling as condition, craving comes to be. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, existence or being, etc., etc. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. But Paguna, with the remainderless fading away and cessation of the six sense of the six bases for contact, comes cessation of contact. With the cessation of contact, cessation of feeling. With the cessation of feeling, cessation of craving. With the cessation of craving, cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging, cessation of being. With the cessation of being, cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So here, this sutta, the Buddha says, there is no being. This is what the Buddha implies. So because of that, you cannot say who consumes, or who feels, or who makes contact, etc. So it's just that these conditions just arise naturally. It's just the perception of a being is just a perception in our mind.